Welcome back, Visions fans. Ready Player Will here. This week in Global, we got the Shadowlynx on Ice, global exclusive as a result of the fan poll that happened, I think it was earlier this year or last year. A lot of people are really interested to hear my thoughts on her, so let's dive into things. So today's review is going to be what we normally cover, the character overview, base and total stat analysis, some points about her crit hit and avoid, accuracy and evasion, all leading up to the report card, where I grade those stats and have a little sneak peek as to the abilities and where I grade her overall kit. I do want to take 5 minutes to add some important context to my final grade here, which I think a lot of people are kind of missing, and for good reason, but I'll address that there. I'll then go through the class and job overview, her AI priorities, the TMR review, my general thoughts, and then some Esper synergies and weapon optimization. So starting off with the character overview, brand new dark unit to global. Obviously, we've had a lot of dark units. A lot of people were hoping for some other elements to have some opportunities here, but it is what it is. They did give her the unique main job of Purple Fairy with the Hunter and Nightblade Sub jobs. She does equip spears, hats, cloths, and accessories with a move of 3, jump of 1 as a 100 cost unit. Now, from a resistance standpoint, she does have some very strong resistances here. 20% to missile, 10% to slash, pierce, and magic. Only the minus 10% to strike. And she is a 50 faith unit, so you don't have to worry terribly about these status elements, but she does have slow, disable, and blind, all three which have had some recent upticks in prevalence. Overall, some pretty good resistances there. Now, from the base stat perspective, overall HP, she does skew on the higher side of things for damage dealers here. That is part of her survivability. From an attack perspective, she does end up kind of a smidge below where some of the top end attack stat characters are, but there are a ton of ways in which she does recover that attack stat, so it doesn't necessarily affect her total in the end. From an agility perspective, it's slightly above average here at 58 agility, decent enough starting spot. From a dexterity perspective, she does start off on the higher side of things, very important as we talk about the crit rate in just a couple slides here. And then luck, she is basically average to just a smidge below average. Now, if we kind of convert these 5 charts bar graphs so we can look at the base stats versus the total stats. So base stats, her real strengths are on the attack side and the HP side of things, the dexterity and agility, all above average from that perspective. Now, when you start incorporating the board and the mastery ability and the nodes and whatnot, there is a little bit of shuffling here. She does lose some relative attack strength compared to others. She does gain some agility relative to other UR units. The dexterity does take a slight hit, but she makes up for it in other ways, as we'll see. And the luck stat, they really take a step down, which is ironic because when they pitched her to us, they called her an evade unit. So very much not an evade unit. But if we're looking at the board itself, one of the unique things that I thought was kind of interesting was that they gave her HP on the board note as opposed to attack stat. A lot of characters get attack stat. Overall, other than the luck, I wouldn't say there's necessarily any glaring weaknesses here. Most of these stats do get made up for in other places in the kit. Now, the crit hit and crit avoid, she is innately the highest critical hit rate unit in the game. Now, there are a lot of units that do have crit rate on their passive abilities, and when you do factor those into consideration, she does end up right around the number 2 spot. Most of them kind of take a jump up to where she is innately. But this is extremely important. She gets a bunch of crit rate on her board nodes as well as her mastery ability to really make sure that she is one of the top crit rate units in the game. Now, her crit avoidance, as we saw, the luck is a relative weakness, so she does skew a little lower on that side. So although she has some nice HP, getting critically hit is something you are going to want to watch out for. Now, accuracy perspective, she does end up relatively average in terms of accuracy. She does have a passive that can bump her up relatively high for another 25%. It's a little debatable if you'll always have that one on though, but it's nice to at least have that opportunity to do so. Overall accuracy with that passive ends up in a relatively decent spot. Now, evasion, not an evade unit. The luck stat is not high enough to do so. We'll just leave it at that. Which brings us finally to our report card. So effective HP, I am going B across all of these here. She's relatively well-rounded against all types here. 10 defense, no spirit innately. She does also have 10 AoE resistance. The bulk mainly comes from her HP pool and the resists, which we saw are relatively strong here. So that's a big part of her overall survivability, at least compared to other damage dealers. The primary stat, I am going B+ here. Good base attack. She does have some good attack passives and buffs as well. So her overall attack stat does not end up suffering in the least. She is relatively high in that regard. Agility, I am going A-. This is actually one of her big strengths here. She's very, very speedy with her passive ability and 2 vision cards, the 15 and 8% sub-vision card. They get her up to 86 agility. The UR average is 80, and the most fastest in the game is 91, so she's only 5 agility points off the top of the game. From the accuracy perspective, I'm going B-. You know, you'll definitely need some investment in the accuracy side of things, but she does have a 100% guaranteed hit, which is relatively flexible. So although the B- is there, and I have that because the passive isn't always a guaranteed to have equipped, it does skew just a smidge below where some are, but I'm kind of going a little low on this than I really should be. It's probably more like a B or B+. Now, evasion, I'm going C, not an evade unit, totally average in that regard. Movement, I am going in A because she does have some good versatility here where you can get move +1 on the passive, can also get jump +1 on a buff, but I do like those options for her. Now, passive abilities, I am going B+ plus here. Well-rounded passives for a variety of builds. I would have liked to see just a smidge more on the unique purple fairy one they gave her. But overall, I like what they've done with them. From the counter perspective, I am giving this an A. I do think she has 2 excellent counter abilities for her kit. The overall kit, I am going a B- though. So the main job does lack many elements of recent cost 100s, which is kind of the bar, right? And the subjobs are fair. A lot of people have Nightblade. That's not really unique to her. The Hunter subjob is nice, but I wouldn't say it's really one of her strengths, which leads to the final grade for me of a B. Now, she's a little niche where she'll truly shine, like really, blow you away with the results. But she has elements to her kit that are going to keep her around and make her a unit that will probably stick around for a while. And I wanted to address something here because there's been some chatter in the community about her being underwhelming, which I agree with. I do think she's underwhelming. But then I've seen a lot of people talk about how she's just a bad unit, that she's not worth the 100 cost tag, that she's just trashed here, that she hits like a wet noodle. To that, slowly roll, I'm going to take 5 minutes to try to dispel that notion. Because A, we've only had one map to experiment with her on. B, half of it is limited guild wars, so you're cost restricted to using her. C, we are in an ice missile meta where Snow does relatively well against her, but we can't be prisoners of the moment. A lot of people are calling her Kane 2.0, but I actually think that's inaccurate. I think she's Oberon 2.0, and I'm here to convince you why. So I'm going to show you all the similarities and overlaps that they have and why I agree she's underwhelming as a 100 cost unit. I'm comparing her to someone that came out well over a year ago, but I don't think anyone here would say that Oberon is a bad unit, so I'm going to make sure that you don't say the same thing about her. Now, Oberon's limit break is a 20% imperil AoE though. Hers is 38% but single target, so hers technically more potent, but similarities there. He's got a 25% imperil on his jump ability. She's got the 25% on one of her counter abilities. He's also got a 30% imperil on his main sub. She's got 25% imperil on the main sub. He only has up to 10% pierce resistance penetration potential, so doesn't she. They're equal in that regard. He's only got 40 defense penetration unless he uses an AoE buff, which quite frequently people have turned off. So he's stuck at that 40 defense penetration innately. She has the 40 because of the passive, but her extra 40 defense penetration is on an active offensive ability, which means you don't have to worry about buffing it. She will more reliably get that higher level of defense penetration than he will. He's got the 100% hit chance, but it's only in a straight line and it's limited to height 1. Hers is diamond shaped. It's also height 3, and it's got trajectory, which means it doesn't require line of sight. So it is an arced type attack like a missile unit would be. So her 100% hit chance is far more versatile in that regard. He does have the self barrier, but she conversely has the 30 AoE resistance, the 25% missile resistance. So you figure that 30 AoE resistance with her 10 on the mastery ability plus the vision card roughly ends up being somewhat equivalent to a barrier when positioned properly. Now, move 3, jump 4, he's also got the Dragoon buff, which can improve both of those by 1. She's got the move 1 passive, the jump 1 buff, so they do have some movement versatility there. He's got similar AI priority to her, where, as we'll see, her main thing is to move to teammates and use the protect and the attack and agility buff. His thing is to move to teammates and use his AoE buff, and they both prefer that teammate buff over their self-preserved single buff, his being the barrier, her being the AoE resistance. So you have to turn off the AoE buff in order for them to use the second one. They share that AI similarity. They both have the Nightblade Sub, so there's some overlap there. She at least has Hunter, so there's some missile access there. Both of their 15 AP abilities are piercing types. His has Stop. Hers has an attack and magic percent break of 43%. Now, Oberon is a 50 faith unit, so the stop potential is far more limited. At least with hers, that break will apply far more frequently. He does have 8 defense and 10 unit resistance. She has 10 defense, 10 AoE resistance, and he's got no barrier break, no courage, no re-raise, or no removal for any of those. Neither does she. Obviously stacked for similarities, in my opinion. And taking this even a step further, if we're looking at stats here, base stats, she's got just a smidge lower HP than he does, but she's got a little bit more attack, 2 extra agility points, a little more dexterity. And even when you go total stats here, he does have more HP than her, about 538 more HP, but she does skew slightly higher on the attack and dexterity side of things, but they're equal on agility and luck, literally equal in their total stats. And if you're looking at resistances, Oberon's got the 10% to slash, 5 to pierce, 0 to strike, 15 to missile, minus 10 to magic. As we saw to hers, I actually prefer her resistances overall to his. I'm far more afraid of minus 10% to magic than I am to minus 10% to strike. So is it okay to be disappointed that she's about as good as a unit that came out a year and a half ago? Yes. Is Oberon a good unit though? Yes, and so isn't she for many of the same reasons. Now, she's not going to define any metas like he did because, the game has evolved with her release compared to his, but I think this is really important context for people to remember when they think about what kind of character she is. So let's finally get into the abilities themselves. The passive abilities, Ice Gliding Fairy is an exceptionally good ability. The 40 defense penetration, the 12% agility. This passive is really what elevates her agility to be a very speedy unit. Hunter's Eye is a niche one for the range +1 if you're using the Hunter Subjob. That being said, I am fairly positive this increases the range of her 100% guaranteed hit because it is that arcing trajectory type. Now, Violet Shadow is that move +1 ability. It does have kind of a wonky passive here where it's an attack buff of 60%, but only when your HP is above 80%. That threshold is quite easily crossed, in my opinion, so you'll lose this attack buff relatively quickly. That being said, if you are fast enough and you can get out ahead of the enemy and you have the right matchup, that extra 60% attack does have the potential to help her one-shot certain characters. And the move +1 is obviously great for a variety of different maps when you need that extra move to go to a teammate, let's say. Now, Nightblade Mastery is where she gets that 25% accuracy, 30% attack, is a nice buff overall. And then Combat Ready for the 15 AP. This is probably best for PvE content, but even then I think you would likely prefer the attack stat. Combat Ready definitely a little more niche. Now the counter abilities, I like 2 of them here. The Edged Evasion is one that they've given her where, if you recall, she is among the highest crit rate in the game. That is an exceptionally important thing to remember about her kit. This ability helps amplify that, where not only does it do damage, but it reduces the enemy's crit evasion for 30 for 3 turns, really ensuring that she can get that critical hit. Now, although this is a good one and feeds really well, I do think Dark Snare is probably the better of the two, where the range on this is exceptionally far. I can basically reach almost the entire map. It's a Dark and Missile debuff of 25% resistant to both. Now, the Missile one you may not get a ton of value out of, but 25% Dark resistance you probably will. That is obviously a great way to amplify your damage, as well as your teammates. And Counter Swing is just kind of whatever, but I personally like Dark Snare. It's also a preemptive ability here. So even if the enemy kills her, she'll at least get this off before she dies, maybe helping a teammate kill them faster. Now for the main job buffs, she's got 2. And I'm going to start with the one that she prioritizes. It's actually the second one here, Dance of the Violet. This grants Protect for herself and teammates. She will use this, even if a teammate is not near her, she will use it on herself first. It's also an attack buff of 40% and an agility buff of 25%. Both stats are 2 of her strengths. This is actually a genuinely good buff, but it's not nearly as good in my opinion as Stance of the Bellflower, where 30 AoE resistance, 25% missile resistance, jump +1, but most important, that for 3 turns, when you hit a critical hit on an enemy, you'll restore 20 AP. That is exceptionally strong, and I'll show you why in just a minute here. Now, again, you will have to probably turn off Dance of the Violet in case you're not getting the second buff off. I think this one is the priority, but as we transition to her offensive abilities, remember, anytime she gets a crit hit, she recovers 20 AP, which means most of these abilities just subtract 20 from them, and that is their net cost to start the battle. So Break Pierce is one that is direct line of sight. It is a piercing type ability. If I bring up kind of the height and range on these, this is the 43% attack and magic buff. That does help her survivability just a little bit here. The Ending Axle is basically Lightning's version of Storm Siphon, where really big giant diamond AoE, and Shadowlynx will recover 15 AP upon killing an enemy, stacking up to 2 times. Triple Combination is another unit type attack. It is a triple hit here. Also reduces the counter chance by 100% for 3 turns to the enemy, and this is the one that increases her defense penetration by 40 for those 3 turns, which leads finally to Perfect Launch, which is the 200% modifier, 100% guaranteed hit, range height of 3, and you can see it does have that arc trajectory attribute to it. So overall in the main job, yes, little limited to unit type attacks. That is a pretty significant downside, but Ending Axle somewhat makes up for it being that relatively large AoE, but really not a lot of utility here. It's more just abusing the pierce damage overall. Now for her subjob here on the Purple Fairy, Slumber of the Iris, I'm basically never going to use. This is a very niche TP-oriented ability. Crosstroke is the one that further decreases enemy pierce resistance by 25%. It is another AoE in the kit, so I do like it for that reason. I think there's a very strong case for you to keep the Purple Fairy subjob on and have Crosstroke enabled. I think it adds some good versatility here for her attack types. Now on the Hunter subjob, Tracking Techniques is basically a repeat of her Protect buff on the main job. I don't really like that there's that much overlap here. But other than that, the only other ability that really stands out to me is Warning Volley. Now it's 1 square further than her Ending Axle ability is, so she might get baited into using this ability a little too soon in the battle than you would like, but it's another valuable type of AoE. It's a pretty wide range in that giant square, and the CT 15 down does do some good things considering how speedy she is. Which brings us finally to the Nightblade subjob. This one, definitely a little more niche for the double resistibility, where pierce and missile resistance certainly does benefit, but it's a lot harder to make this ability work. And then Maiming Slash is obviously great for the healing power down, considering all the healing and self-heal that there is. The real upside for me with the Nightblade is that if you are using a slash-oriented physical dark team, with Dark Leela's slash res pen buff, as well as the Anima Vision card, This Nightblade does lean into some of the slash synergies that Dark has to offer. I don't think it's preferable for her, but it's a nice thing that it's there. Which brings us finally to the limit break and the mastery ability. Now this limit break, kind of underwhelming in my opinion. Yes, 38% dark resistance and peril is nice, but it's only single target. It is a double hit. There's some chaining potential here, but it's really only a dark chain, an element chain. It's not a pierce chain. And the 25% agility down is nice. I just don't know if it's nice enough considering it's only on one unit. The mastery ability, this is where they give her AoE resistance of 10 and an extra crit rate of 20 just to make sure that she is maintaining that crit rate uptime. Now for the TMR review, this one I don't really love. The fact that it's a cloth is kind of a downside. There's a lot better, regular pieces of cloth that you can equip. Stat wise, it's nothing special. 335 HP, 8 defense, 12 crit rate. The TMR skill, it's nice that it's another like teammate AoE one, so from a movement potential, I do like the shape of it, but dispelling regen is not really that prevalent. It's really the dispelling of the haste, which is the big upside here. I just know that in the game, there's a lot of other ways to currently dispel haste as well. So although it's nice that they've introduced this as an alternative, this one at least gives the opportunity for it. So TMR could be a little better. Now for my general thoughts overall, self-sufficient enough due to her innate stats and pierce-oriented damage. That's the one thing about many of these pierce units, is that the game has tuned that resistance and that attack type to not really require a ton of modifiers per se, or a ton of penetration. And those units tend to be just a smidge on the bulkier side. So as we transition to maybe some more like dual element comps or more job overlapping comps, she's definitely self-sufficient enough to really be a premier pierce type unit. Now the speed is also, in my opinion, a legitimate strength. Obviously there's the 25% buff on the AoE, the limit break to the enemy 25% down to them, warning volley having the 15 CT down. Her vision card, as we'll see in a second, gives her 8% agility. So that speed is definitely a strength of hers, where getting that extra attack before an enemy can is very important. Now, excellent AP management with the 20 AP recovered on crit hit buff. I think that is an exceptionally good buff to make sure that she can continue that damage uptime. And as I mentioned, the utility overall leaves something to be desired other than those imperils. At this stage in the game, imperils are kind of everywhere. It's not really special to her anymore. She does have the reduced counter chance 100%, but it's only single target. The attack magic of 43% break is fine, but that's not a main strength in the game nowadays. The AoE protect and the attack and agility buff is nice, but in my opinion, not the priority buff. And we've seen more and more people having this AoE protect because it is a little more prevalent now. It's just not as special or as impactful as it once was. And as mentioned, the CT down is a nice piece of utility for what it's worth, and the healing power down on the Nightblade can be nice. Now the one upside here, her vision card is a legitimate strength here. 8% agility to self, 20 extra dark attack, 24% missile resistance to her and the party. Now these are all job oriented. 40% attack to the party, and 25 crit damage, where again, a high crit rate unit means that basically all her attacks will have that extra 25 modifier as well. It is one of the few vision cards that is for pierce units that will be coming out, so I do like it in that regard. I do think she's underwhelming given the bar set for more recent 100 cost units, and particularly because she lacks many of the things that would ever be considered, meta defining in terms of barriers or dispels or unique effects or really unique buffs. But I will say, I do think she will likely replace Dark Leela in many of the dark comps. Now Dark Leela, some of her old strength was Joker giving her protect, the amount of slash resistance penetration, less courage removal in the game, less healing power down, so her survivability was a little bit higher. And with many people transitioning to Dark Fina and Halloween Lucia within their party, between the vision card economy that they have and some of the overlap between the attack types and stuff, Leela's still very, very good. But I actually think that Shadowlynx will perform better because she doesn't require as much investment to still maintain her impact. Now, we'll finally cap things off here with the Esper and weapon optimization. Espers definitely want to focus the dark attack, human killer, pierce attack. I think the accuracy and the resist, although she does have the 100% hit, she's just accurate enough, or could be just accurate enough, that an Esper certainly will make her far more reliable in that regard. Obviously, Odin and Chaos Odin are the two best ones, but just some honorable mentions that I think do have a time and place as well. I do think Anima is an interesting one. 17 agility here. Has the dark attack, the slash resistance, light resistance and light killer, the crit evade, and 7% attack. And just kind of barreling through these. Omega's another one. This one's obviously a little more oriented toward magic resistance and bumping up the actual attack stat itself, as opposed to modifiers. Demon Wall is one of the better ones here. Obviously on the slower side, but her being such a fast character, you can sacrifice a couple of points of agility here and there. I think Titan's another good one. 15 agility. She doesn't have any spirit. This is a way to give her some spirit. Pierce attack gets the accuracy as well. Elphicaris is another great Esper here. Pierce attack, missile resistance, which is very meta at the moment. Crit damage and the 7% attack, also very fast Esper. MAX, pierce attack, slash resistance, crit damage, the attack, and it does have ice resistance as well. So again, very meta pertinent at the moment. And then finally, Behemoth is an interesting one too. Dark attack, crit damage, and it has strike resistance, which I only put here for that one noteworthy bit where I'm personally never really afraid of the amount of strike damage in the game at the moment. But that is her only negative resistance. So if you did want to hedge that one, Behemoth is a quick and easy way to get that positive, in addition to the 15% attack. So bunch of Espers to potentially play with. It really just comes down to how you want to use and who you're facing. Now, from the weapon optimization, there's also a fair amount of choices here. Now, Winged Lance is my personal favorite. Yes, a smidge lower on the attack stat compared to many of the other ones, but very well rounded from the 20 accuracy and the 18 crit rate. The crit damage of 15 is higher than what you get on the Trust Stones. The attack 30% is also higher than what you get on Trust Stones. And the Pierce attack 20 is among some of the higher of the Pierce modifiers that you would get for a weapon. So although the actual attack stat is a little lower, I think you make up for it due to the 30% attack stat that you get down here, as well as the extra crit damage. Now, another really good one here is the Platinum Lance. And so sure, you might get some higher attack stat on it, but again, that's where you sacrifice the accuracy and crit rate, whereas the Winged Lance at least kind of had all three. But this one is still good for the reaction block rate of 30%, the initial AP of 20, which I personally don't think she needs. I think her AP regen on that buff is good enough that I don't think the extra 4 starting AP really changes any breakpoints for her. And 15 Pierce attack is less than the Winged Lance. So overall, still a good option, but not my personal favorite. I do think Wind Spear is still another great one for the 5 agility, and kind of similar to the Winged Lance, gives you the accuracy and the crit rate on that critical build. I do like that a lot. Also has Pierce attack 20, definite thumbs up for this spear as well. And then finally, for a TMR recommendation, I do think the Light Halberd is an interesting recommendation too. This is Veln's TMR, and the ability is when you get a critical hit, you will get 30 extra accuracy. So again, if you're not trying to rely on that 100% hit chance and instead want to use the other AoE abilities or whatnot, she does crit hit often enough that you will likely take full advantage of this effect. And obviously, objectively speaking, damage-wise, this is not the most optimal, but if you want to use some bulk in those first 2 slots instead and still have her retain some attack value in the TMR position, I think this one's an honorable mention. But that's the Shadowlynx on Ice review in a nutshell. Again, I don't think she's going to really make any waves in the short term. I don't think she's particularly overpowering, but I do think she's got some consistency enough that she is worthy of the 100 cost designation, and adds an X factor to the Dark element where they were kind of missing that at the moment. Their forte is obviously the slash related damage with Anima and what many of their top tier characters do, as well as the magic oriented damage with Halloween Lucia, Dark Fina, and to a lesser extent, Garvel and Black Rose Elena. But Kayn at this point really has been power crept statistically. He's just not as viable in really like 99% of situations. So giving Dark a more consistent Pierce oriented unit, I actually do think is a good addition for that element, even though obviously we still think other elements are a little more worthy of that opportunity at that moment. But that's kind of where things are in the meantime. Hopefully this is informative. Good luck to those that are pulling. Hopefully you get some value out of her as the game continues to evolve. The vision card at the very least is an excellent vision card. But until next time, thanks for watching everyone. Comments, critiques, questions, all in the comment section below. Always appreciate it. And I'll talk to y'all soon.